Alderman Cone. Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. Commissioner Banton. Commissioner Bradley. Commissioner Garmendia. Present. Commissioner Fowler.
Present.
Commissioner Hernandez. Commissioner Hubman. Commissioner Jorgensen.
Present.
Commissioner Williams.
Present.
I know, like, we
Are there
missed
people
some
online that
people
we can't
somehow.
hear, or we have not,
I can't.
we're not
We
there?
think we have people online.
Yep, Sterling Miller's online.
Great, thank
Okay,
you.
all right. Commissioner,
That's working. Careful.
Commissioner Miller.
I'm here.
One, two, three, 4, 5, 6. I need Shameen
We
to.
need somebody else to say they're here because
Yeah.
we're short one.
And we're short one right now
Maybe
for
there, but they're
quorum.
not speaking. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, all right.
If she says she can,
But if we don't have quorum, we can't.
yeah, we need to.
Yeah, we need to wait. The boss. In the chat, okay.
Okay, she said she's expecting. Okay, oh, that's good.
Okay, great. All right. First thing on the agenda is to approve the minutes. Do I have a motion?
Motion approved minutes.
Thank you. And second?
Second.
Sorry, who, oh, Karen. So motion by Commissioner Fowler and second by Mr. Commissioner Young. I'm calling you the wrong last name.
I wasn't there.
Sorry, Williams.
Can I second if I wasn't there?
Oh, is that an issue? He does not
Yes,
attend. Can he still? Okay, no problem.
Very good.
All right. Could I have a vote?
Alderman Cone. Alderwoman Clark Hubbard.
Aye.
Commissioner Banton. Commissioner Bradley. Commissioner Garmendia. Aye. Commissioner Fowler.
Aye.
Commissioner Hernandez. Commissioner Hubman. Commissioner Jorgensen.
Abstain.
Commissioner Miller.
Yes.
Commissioner Williams.
Aye.
Chair Boaz.
Aye.
Six, the motion passes with six voting aye and one abstention.
All right, thank you. All right, we have 3 action items this evening and 1 informational item. The first action item includes a public hearing. So if you'd like to participate in the public hearing, make sure you are signed in with Michelle if you're in the room. And if you're online, please sign in that chat on Zoom. And we will call you in the order that you have signed up once it's time for remarks. Remarks will be limited to 2 minutes each. So the first speaker from the planning team is James Pfister.
Hi. Good evening, commissioners. It's a pleasure to be here. Great to see you all. My name is James Pfister. I'm a senior planner with PDA. I'm going to be presenting agenda item number 3 pertaining to a proposed amendment to an adopted community unit plan. Just to note, Miriam said I have 7 to 10 minutes, and when I first timed myself, it was 17 minutes long. So I got faster. It won't be that long. But if you feel my presentation lacks meat, I do too. No, we've got plenty of time, and we've got lots of speakers here to answer all of your questions.
Has revised her direction. Take the time you need.
No one's ever accused me of being brief. So this item is reviewing and hopefully recommending a proposed amendment to an adopted community unit plan. We're going to present, staff is presenting its review of the application, and spoiler alert, we are going to ask the commission to find that the proposed amendment to the Danforth Campus Community Unit Plan meets the relevant 3 conditions in the city's code, that it is in conformity with the city's strategic land use plan, and to recommend approval to the Board of Aldermen. All of that will become clear over the next 7 to 10 minutes. Some background about a community unit plan. It's a zoning overlay district enabled by our city's code. It is a special tool intended to provide some flexibility to the scale, to the uses of development that otherwise might not be achieved through the existing underlying zoning districts. It provides advantages to applicants who are interested in large, unique, or mixed-use developments. Currently, there are just 2 in the city, 2 community unit plans. One is Washington University's Danforth campus, the one we're talking about today, and the other one is Washington University's medical campus. Both new community unit plans, as they are applied for, and amendments to the community unit plan are evaluated using a specific criteria that we're going to go through today. Just an overview of this proposed amendment. There is the existing Danforth Campus Community Unit Plan. It is located at Washington University's Danforth campus, the portion of which is within the city limits. Forest Park Parkway to the north, Skinker to the east, Forsyth to the south, city limits to the west. The proposal is to add 1 parcel that is to the south across Forsyth from the existing CUP at Skinker. The goal is to facilitate redevelopment of the parcel and also to add specific new area standards to the parcel. The applicant, spoiler alert, Washington University. Little background about the Danforth Campus CUP itself. It was initially adopted in 2000. It has facilitated more than $200 million worth of investment in a portion of the Danforth campus. We've seen the construction of many new buildings, rehab of existing buildings, the CUP has replaced a lot of surface parking. They've also installed a new big underground parking garage, a portion of which is underneath the footprint of the Danforth CUP. It's been amended a series of times. Once in 2007, it was approved by and recommended by the Planning Commission. There have been some additional amendments made by BPS. Not all amendments to CUPs rise to the level of requiring review by the Planning Commission. We've got very brilliant zoning staff who can answer questions about that should you have them. I've already warned them. It actually works. Just wanted to take a look at the CUP as it existed at adoption in the year 2000. There were a couple of buildings within the boundaries. Most of the CUP area was covered by surface parking, a little bit of green space. Fast forward to this aerial is from 2022. 8+ mixed-use buildings. Also, you can see on those pink arrows, the entrances to the large underground parking garage, which will be more relevant later. A portion of the garage is underneath the footprint of the CUP. And just highlighting once again, the proposed expansion area, 1 parcel across Forsyth to the south. This image is taken from the CUP amendment application that you have in entirety in your packets. This just shows the current sort of site area for the proposed CUP, including the existing buildings within the Danforth campus CUP and the 2 structures that would fall within the expansion area that we're talking about today. Let's talk about that expansion area. It's 1 parcel. It's just over 1 acre large. Used to be 2 parcels. 6214 Forsyth was acquired by the university in 2009. It's an administrative building. This plan does not anticipate any changes to that use. 6200 Forsyth was formerly a church, Unity Christ Church. That church operated in the building until 2022, and the university acquired it that year. The underlying zoning for both the existing CUP and the proposed expansion area is the A single family dwelling district. Just another look at the current conditions of the expansion area itself. As you can see, there's the 2 structures, the church, the university building. There are 2 entrances to the parcel, vehicular entrances to the north along Forsyth, 1 along Skinker. Decent amount of parking. Key to the CUP is the new area regulations. These are the ways that the applicant finds that flexibility to assist with development that is otherwise harder to achieve with the underlying code. This is, the real meat of the CUP, but I am going to go a little quickly through it. But this information is on all of these slides, so we can go back to them should we have any specific questions about the area standards. The underlying zoning code, as we said, it's District A, that's residential. There are a variety of other non-residential uses that are allowed by right within an A district, but this CUP expands the permitted by right primary and accessory uses. The primary uses are intended to be offices for universities, technology staff, administrative purposes, student service departments, office space, meeting or gathering spaces. There's new standards about coverage. Structure footprints shouldn't cover more than 70% of the lot, the expansion area. Building height, allowable building height would be raised to 4 stories or 75 feet. There's regulations pertaining to screening as well as to access. The proposed regulations will tighten up the access allowed on the lot or the existing access on the property. 1 vehicle access point will be allowed along Forsyth, 1 vehicle access point along Skinker, with pedestrian and bicycle access points along Forsyth. There are new setback area standards, both the north and to the south, minimum of 25-foot setbacks. To the east and to the west, a minimum of 5 feet setbacks. Surface parking would be permitted within the setbacks. A minimum of 8 parking spaces will be required within the expansion area, including ADA accessible and EV ready parking spaces. This is just a direct quote from the application itself. All other parking shall be provided in existing parking structures on the Danforth campus. Just a reminder, mere less than 1/5 of a mile away is their large underground parking garage. I walked it myself, not that bad. There are architectural standards as well as landscaping and signage standards. Signage is the only portion of this CUP amendment in which we are nodding to or using the existing Danforth campus CUP. The signage standards that are a part of the existing Danforth campus CUP are going to apply to the expansion area as well. Those were most recently approved by BPS in 2020. Now, as I mentioned, there are 3 criteria that staff use to evaluate all CUP applications and amendment applications. We're going to go through those, and I'm going to provide staff's comment on these criteria. First of which is that the values of buildings and the character of the property adjacent to the area included in said plan will not be adversely affected. When we look at the surrounding area of the expansion area, there are religious uses. There's a church to the south, several churches to the south, private school to the west, other institutional uses, including the Danforth campus to the north and beautiful Forest Park to the east. The intended uses contained within the application are all of a similar use to the adjoining areas, the adjoining parcels. Staff does not anticipate that the values of the buildings or the character will be adversely affected by the uses outlined in the expansion area standards. Second criteria is that said plan is consistent with the intent and purpose of the zoning code to promote public health, safety, morals, and general welfare. Similar to the first criteria, the uses that are proposed in this application to expand the CUP are not so wildly different to the uses that are allowed within the underlying zoning code, and not so drastically different from the existing land uses around the expansion area. The intended uses do not foretell, extreme increase of vehicular traffic or pedestrian traffic at odd hours. The uses in the expansion area should pretty well be in line with the surrounding land uses. So staff finds that the second criteria is met by this application. And lastly, that the average lot area per family contained in the site, exclusive of the area occupied by street, shall not be less than the lot area per family required for the district in which the development is located. This pertains to residential density. For our purposes here today, the application for expanding the Danforth Campus Community Unit Plan does not intend any primary uses that will be residential. So this criteria does not really apply to this amendment to the CUP. So staff finds that the application meets this criteria. And lastly, as in all things, we want to make sure that the CUP application and its amendment are in conformity with the land use element of the comprehensive plan of the city of St. Louis. Nice and straightforward here. The existing footprint of the Danforth Campus Community Unit Plan is entirely designated institutional preservation and development areas. Also, the parcel in question that would be added to the community unit plan is also designated IPDA. These are areas of educational, medical, religious, or other institutional uses. Although the use might be changing slightly, the proposed uses contained in the CUP are perfectly in line with the strategic land use plan designation. So staff finds that the amended CUP would be in conformity with the strategic land use plan. I didn't time myself, so I have no idea how long that was, but I would now like to turn it over to our friends from Washington University. I'm going to invite Joanna up to introduce herself and take you through some additional information about the proposed amendment to the CUP. Oh,
Sorry.
sure. No, absolutely. Any additions at this point from zoning staff before we move into?
No.
Sure.
Well, my name's Evan. I'm the development planner for the zoning staff. I just want to reiterate that, our current zoning districts don't really allow for some type of upzoning that would accommodate what their proposal is. So again, the CUP becomes the best tool to kind of facilitate the expansion. That's all.
Thank you, Evan. All right, now I'm going to turn it over to Joanne.
Good evening, Commissioners. I am Joanna Schooler. I am the Assistant Vice Chancellor of Local Government and Community Relations at Washington University. It's a pleasure to be able to talk about this proposed expansion. There we go. So to avoid repeating a lot of the same information, we've already talked about the fact that this expansion area is at the corner, close to the corner of Forsyth and Skinker. It consists of an existing building that we use as a tech den and a church that was a former Unity Christ Church. The expansion is planned to enable a new building to be used for student services, excuse me, and administrative offices. We plan to build a new building, 25,000 square feet facility to house office space and flexible meeting space as well. The facilities are intended for employees who are already working on campus in other areas. It should be less than 40 employees. There will be limited parking on site, as we talked about, for accessibility. And for visitors, there will be a drop-off lane for 15-minute parking. And as we've discussed, ample parking across the street and the underground garage at the east end of campus for employees, visitors, and students. In addition, there is a campus shuttle stop that is immediately west of the site. On Forsyth, there's a Metrolink station within 2 minutes for easy access. There's also pedestrian walkways and bike paths. So we think that this area will be served well from all of those aspects. The proposal involves maintaining the existing curb cuts for ingress and egress, and we can talk about that. My colleagues, in terms of the traffic study that was conducted. This is the photo of existing conditions. We think of this as a premier corner in the city. That certainly there's an opportunity to be able to enhance the corner and contribute to the vibrancy of a vibrant area. The view here is of the building that we've proposed, a rendering of the proposed building. This is shown from the northeast corner looking onto the site. You can see the existing Tech Den building just to the right of the new building. And the proposed building will be 3 stories with area at the top of the structure for mechanical equipment. This is another picture of existing conditions. And this is a picture of the view of the southeast corner of the building. And then here, this is again the northwest corner, but this gives you a view of, this is the northeast corner, but it gives you a view of the northwest corner, which shows the area that's closest to the existing building that will be retained, plus the garden area and entrance area that is planned for this building. And with that, certainly I would take any comments. Any questions?
We'll have questions in a
Okay.
few minutes, but we can just go ahead and open the public hearing.
Absolutely.
Could I have a motion to open the public hearing? Second. So we have a motion from Commissioner Garmendia, second from Commissioner Williams. All right, the public hearing is open. Do we have anyone on the list to speak in the room?
You want me to do a roll call? Or no?
Oh, sorry. Thank you. No, we have an extension. So yes, please go.
Okay. Alderwoman Clark Hubbard.
Yes, I certainly don't have any questions. I had multiple meetings around this project with Washington University. Are we on questions? Because it's kind of hard for me to hear.
Oh,
No, ma'am, we're doing a roll call to open the public hearing.
Oh, okay, thank you. I'm sorry. It's hard for me to hear in the microphone that they're speaking on. Um, not so much the speakers, but the roll call for this. I'm sorry, I couldn't hear it, but aye.
Okay.
Thank you.
Commissioner Fowler,
Aye.
Commissioner Garmendia,
Can we do previous role?
No, we had an abstention.
No.
that was an aye, okay. Commissioner Miller,
Aye.
Commissioner Jorgensen,
Aye.
Commissioner Williams,
Aye.
Chair Boaz.
Aye.
Okay, and the public hearing is open with all present voting aye.
Do we have anyone registered in the room?
No,
to
I
speak?
don't.
No? Do we have anyone in the, all right. No, none online. So with no comments, we should close the public hearing. Could I have a motion?
Motion to close.
I'm sorry,
Motion to close the public
Thank
hearing.
Commissioner Fowler,
Second?
Garamendia?
Mhm.
All right.
Yeah, we
Roll.
can do.
You can do what?
Yes. Previous, all right. So previous roll. All right, the public hearing is closed. So now questions from the commissioners. Let's just go ahead and start in order. Do we have Alderman Cone with us?
He did not. Is he on?
Okay.
No.
All right. Alderwoman Shamim Clark Hubbard, please.
Thank you so much. Good evening, fellow commissioners. Good evening to WashU staff that's in the room. I was sorry for getting started early. I guess I was eager, but I have had multiple conversations and meetings, as you can imagine, as being the other person for this ward. I'm sorry, for the area where the building falls in. So I want to just publicly thank WashU for being intentional of not just meeting with me, but first and foremost, meeting with communities, surrounding communities, getting input, keeping them abreast of the project as it progressed as we went through the different boards. Certainly the preservation board and other necessary steps that have been taken. So as this is a necessary step, I'm just still standing in support and will be looking forward to helping assist of my fellow commissioners having additional questions that I can help answer, or of course, the staff that's in the room. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Commissioner Fowler? You have any questions?
Oh, yeah, I have just a couple quick questions. My first question is like a clarification for staff. I have a question on a couple of the slides. We kind of flip-flop between showing the CUP go and cover Forsyth versus, I think in the staff provided details, it does not cover Forsyth. So for me, fairly new for the commission. So I just want to clarify, would the street be included in the CUP, or does that even matter? Just, does my question make sense?
Oh, absolutely. And I might ask Evan to clarify, but I'm pretty sure the CUP does not pertain to the public right of way at all.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, and
Great.
then, perfect. So just for clarification, for the future, can we have I guess, the amendment updated in the report so that it does not show it? I just want to be clear for the future. So in the written up, got me, I just want to. The other question I had, should have started off by saying,
Thank you. Did everybody hear that? The boundaries of the CUP will include public right of way, but the regulations that pertain to the CUP do not regulate what happens in the public right of way.
okay, thanks. My other question, sorry, I had some notes here. I do want to thank you guys. I had a lot of stuff written down and your presentations were great because it answered them as you're going through those. So I appreciate it. I think you guys did traffic study to figure out that the two entrances would be great. And so I'm sure that nothing was found there that was of a red flag or anything.
Oh, hi, I'm Stacy Way. I'm a managing principal at Christner Architects. We're the architect on the project. We've been working with Lockmuller Group. They were engaged very early in the process to do a traffic impact study of that entire neighborhood. They actually informed the circulation and location of the curb cuts. So what we're showing on our plans aligns with what their recommendation was for that. And they will continue to work with the streets department. They've been in ongoing communications with them just to, dot all the i's and cross all the t's at the end of the day.
Okay, perfect.
Yep.
I think that's all my questions right now. You guys did a great job presenting and answering questions and being prepared. Thanks.
Yes, thanks. I guess one of the confusion parts of the exhibits in our packet from the WashU team, the CUP does include the street, so maybe updating the exhibits. I also don't know the difference between all four of these exhibit maps. There's well, A is obvious, but B, C, and D all look the same to me. So.
So really, we were following the formatting of the original CUP and aligning with the exhibits that were presented or included in that CUP. So it is a little bit redundant, but we wanted to make sure we were maintaining that formatting. So the first exhibit is current existing conditions. So it's, of course, showing this parcel as not included in the CUP. The second amendment shows the inclusion of the parcel before the development occurs. So it is the current state of that parcel. The third exhibit shows what the site will look like after this construction project is completed. And then the fourth exhibit is consistent with what was included in the CUP and identifying identical future development sites. So essentially, we are saying that those future development sites that were in the original CUP, those have not changed, those remain the same.
Thank you. And my other comment, this looks like a great use of the site. Appreciate that. I personally have a concern with just bicycle traffic on that part, because I was a victim of a hit and run out of that church parking lot when I was a student at WashU. So sight lines are going to be important, but it looks like the design of the site itself kind of takes that into account. It's far set enough back from the sidewalk that visibility would be, improved. But yeah, I think it's I think the, overall, and the part where I got hit is just right outside your boundaries. So if you pick up the church next door, put a little plaque for me. But thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Jorgensen, any questions?
No, I think this looks wonderful, and I just want to thank Washington University for being great partners for the city.
Thank you.
Commissioner Miller, you have questions?
No, I don't. I'm good.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Williams.
Yeah, just one clarifying question. Again, going back to the curb cut off of Skinker. So traffic does jam up quite a bit there, so I'm actually interested. I mean, it's interesting that Lockmuir didn't find any issue there. I guess well, so is the traffic direction in the parking area is it one direction? So turning a left turn off of Skinker and then exiting onto Forsyth, is that what the idea?
Yes, and we haven't finalized conversations with the streets department, but essentially the vehicular circulation through the site is one way. If you are coming south on Skinker, you would turn right into the site, and then when you exit, you would be required to turn right out of the site as well, and that is to avoid conflicts with Forsyth School. One of the other major pinch points is during school drop-off and pickup, traffic backs up there quite a bit. So left turns would not be allowed during those peak kind of periods. And we're discussing with the streets department exactly how to monitor and enforce, and is it through signage? How are we going to do that? We don't have those details finalized yet, but we're in conversations with them to work that out.
So a left turn off of Skinker is prohibited.
In which direction?
You're going
If
north
you're
into the
coming
parking
from the
lot.
south, you would be able to turn left off Skinker, correct? Per the current conversation.
That was my only.
Yeah, that we initially had the circulation going the opposite direction, and they really, once they ran the numbers, they were very much not in favor of that due to all the backup around Forsyth School and on Forsyth in general. So this was their preferred recommendation. We're still working out all the details, but they feel confident in it.
Follow-up question?
I have one
Okay.
more question. Okay, I have one more, or more of a comment. Evan, in his commentary, answered my question, which was why, what was missing from this packet for planning staff was, why was the CUP needed? The expansion needed at all, because it actually doesn't say that. But Evan answered the question saying that the use was not compatible with the existing zoning. So, thank you. That was my only comment, and maybe a note for planning staff.
Thought about like several options for how to, establish the right zoning for the project. Any number of rezonings just kept seeming like they would either not take care of the full kind of scope of the project or start to conditionally allow things that like do not make sense at this site. So the overlay tool was a great tool for this type of specific project at a very specific and kind of sensitive and highly visible site. But yeah, very fair comment.
Any other questions from the commissioners? Okay, James, would you like to restate the recommendation?
I would love to. All right. So the official staff recommendation on this item is that the Planning Commission finds the proposed Second Amendment of the Third Amended and Restated Danforth Campus Community Unit Plan to meet the three conditions in section 2680.070 of the city's revised code and to be in conformity with the city's strategic land use plan and recommends approval to the city's Board of Aldermen.
Could I have a motion?
Move.
Second.
Okay. Thank you. All right, so we have a motion from Alderwoman Clark Hubbard and a second from Commissioner Williams. Could you call the roll?
Alderwoman Clark Hubbard,
Aye.
Commissioner Fowler,
Aye.
Commissioner Garmendia,
Aye.
Commissioner Miller,
Aye.
Commissioner Jorgensen,
Aye.
Commissioner Williams,
Aye.
Chair Boaz,
Aye.
and the motion passes with all present voting aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Washu, for being such great partners. Next thing on our agenda is a request for the Planning Commission review of a demolition denial.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Dylan Sabish. Normally I'm behind the computer, so it's nice to be in front of the camera this time. I work as an urban designer for PDA, but every now and then I have the pleasure of helping with some of the planning efforts. Today, we're here to talk about a request for demolition or the denial of a request and a review of that denial. And so kind of a two-step process. Tonight's first step is to just accept or deny that request. Sorry, I got the clicker. So it'll be about this particular project or property. So it's actually three properties, 3146, 3148, and 3150 Morganford Road. They're all adjacent to each other, located in the Oak Hill National Register Historic District, also a preservation review district. And the request for demo is so that it can be replaced with a 4-story apartment building with ground floor parking. So the timeline on this project, there's a bit of history. The applicant first applied for a preliminary approval in 2023. That was withheld. About 15 months later, they applied for a appeal of denial, a director's denial from the Preservation Board. That again was that denial was upheld. So they again were not granted permission. December, they appealed to us for a review of that decision. So that's kind of where we're at today. Just so, you know, some of the dates make sense. There's a 30-day calendar from when they get it. So they received their notice of denial November. So they had until, sorry, September. And then so they had a month to send us the request. So just kind of clarifying some of that. I can explain a little more if that wasn't clear, but they made it in time, basically. So again, I mentioned it's a two-step process. The first step of that process is the question before you now, whether you want to take up this review. If you so select, you know, if you decide to do that, just so that I know there's some newer members of the commission. So if you decide to do that, the review would come in the form of just kind of determining the correctness of the board's decision. So the review would be limited to those confines, the kind of record of the minutes during that time period, and no new or additional information would be allowed into that. And then from that review, you would have three options. So you could affirm the Preservation Board's decision, reverse the decision, or modify the decision. Just keep it simple there. But with that being said, Bob, our Director of the Cultural Resources Office, is here to kind of give a little bit more flesh to the situation.
Not too much flesh. What's that mean, Dylan? Hi, I'm Bob Bettis. I'm the Director of the Cultural Resources Office. So nice to meet you all. I don't want to get into detailed of a presentation because if you do take this up, then I will kind of go point by point by point for our ordinance, show you the basis for our recommendation and, go through what the board really reviewed at a detailed level. What I will show you briefly is the PowerPoint that staff gave that evening. I'll just give you some more background. And I'm here to answer any questions you may have. So first up, as Dylan said, our jurisdiction, the properties are located in the Oak Hill National Register Historic District. So these three properties are part of that district. They contribute to the district, so they are important in that national district. So per our ordinance, they're considered merit properties. So it's an important layer and level of significance for properties. So that's how we look at these properties. So we have these three buildings. They were all determined to be merit properties per our ordinance. Through these quickly, this property at 3146 Morgan Ford, built in 1895. This is the commercial building that in the middle of the two buildings. This was built in 1901. And then the corner building, which was also built in 1901. I should note that there are two photographs on each slide. One was in the original presentation back in 23, and then the one recently. So there's really no change to the buildings at all, condition wise. There might be something small, but overall they're the same shape as we reviewed back in 23. Some context. Again, I'll get into this deeper next time, but context is an important part of what we consider. So it's a strong context to existing historic streetscape. And then looking south, you have the MoFo, 7-Eleven, a little more of a, I would say, the streetscape a little more varied in terms of its condition. Some more context to the site. It's across the street, a little better historic context. And towards Tower Grove Park. This is the Sanborn map. It's a fire insurance map from 03 showing the properties as they were then. And this is the proposed design. Also, one of the things we consider when we do our review is the actual review is the demolition of the buildings. And one thing we consider is the new construction that would replace it. And this is the last slide. I want to note that when we reviewed it in 23 and 24, there was no change to the proposal or the buildings. So the staff report was the exact same that the board considered, and it was the same recommendation that we gave at that time as well. So there was no change whatsoever to the proposal or the building. So there was, again, not a single change at all to the staff report or our recommendation. So any questions?
All right, let's go ahead and go through the list again. Still no Alderman Cohn? All right, Alderman Clark Hubbard?
Thank you so much, Madam President, and thank you, Mr. Bettis. Was there any feedback or input from the alderperson at the hearings?
Oh, yeah, she was in support of the application for the demolitions.
Any other questions?
I guess I will follow that up with what about the community?
Sure.
And the neighborhood organizations?
Yeah, I say that would be probably the one difference between the two presentations. The first time there was some engagement from the community, but the second presentation in 24, there was a lot more neighborhood input in support of the project. In terms of the proposal, nothing different, but there was, I would say, definitely more support at the neighborhood level. But we did also have some opposition to the project as well.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much. Let's see. Alderman, sorry. Commissioner Fowler.
Just one question. You said between the two times this was brought up to your group, was there feedback given the first time that said, you know, if you did this or if you changed this about the proposal, or do you even have that option to give them like feedback to say, this is why we are denying? I know they didn't come back, but did you give them the input the first time?
Sure. Full disclosure, first time that was with a former director. So I was not installed at that time. I really don't know what input Meg Lusto at the time provided to the applicant, honestly.
No further questions.
Thank you.
Not a judge. Whatever. That sounded weird.
Didn't sound weird at all. It was
A
fine.
lawyer.
Yes, I don't know if you'll be able to answer this question, but I was just noting that the part of the context is the is it the Bofo?
Building.
Yeah.
Bofo building. Obviously, that looks modern.
Sure.
What was on the site of that parcel? Do you
It
have-
was a really, really nice car wash. Yeah, it was right. Yeah, it was like a it was a car wash. It was demolished sometime in the early aughts. Yeah.
And I'm trying to make sure I'm reading at least the comparison between the Sanborn map and the modern day. On the Sanborn map, is that corner building gone?
Nope, it's still there.
It's still
Yeah,
there?
all three. Yeah. So there's 4 buildings there. It's the 3, you see at the corner are the ones in question. Yeah.
Okay, so that's the tall brick
Yeah.
one.
Let me show you. No, it's this guy, right? This is the corner building. Yeah.
And then it's the storefront one is next to it.
Is in the middle, correct.
And then the one I can't see,
Little
this
baby.
picture is the little one.
This guy right here. Yeah. Yep.
It just looked like there was 4 buildings on the Sanborn maps that I was.
There is. It's the one next door, but it's not, it's just
That one's
when
not
they
in the,
when they prepared the separate report, they didn't crop it out. And I agree. It's a little confusing.
that's all my questions.
Sure.
Okay, great. Commissioner Jorgensen?
Can you explain what the criteria are to determine if losing the existing buildings would negatively impact the appearance and integrity of the area?
Sorry, say again.
I said, could you explain the criteria to determine if losing the existing buildings would negatively impact the appearance and integrity of the corridor? That's one of the findings of fact that the board made.
Sure. So again, there's 18 criteria that we look at. And so as kind of an amalgam of several of these criteria to make that one point. Some of the things we do look at are its effect on the urban design and the streetscape itself. So we look at the historic context of that block. So it's the loss of these 3 historic buildings, it's their scale, their architecture. That's what we consider as part of the criteria within the ordinance. And again, we don't want to list all 18 of those criteria when we do our findings of fact, just for the sake of sanity of our board. But the loss of the historic buildings impacts the historic streetscape. So that's how we come to the conclusion to make that one note.
And what makes these buildings historic exactly, other than that they're a little bit old?
Again, so they are part of the Oak Hill Historic District. It's a national district. So it's the 2010, the area was defined as that Oak Hill neighborhood. And it was went through a process to be listed on the National Register of Historic Places. That is verified by the state and the National Park Service. So this area in particular for its collection of architecture and history is why they're important. It's each one has gone through and determined their age and their, what's the word I'm looking for? If they're still intact architecturally, they still have that, original form, that kind of thing. So it's looked at individually if they are still intact historically as a collection of buildings. So it's not individually, it's they make up the makeup of that entire neighborhood and district.
So, and this is getting to something
Sure.
subjective, but do you look at what do they actually look like? Do they contribute anything aesthetically to the neighborhood? Because I would say that they don't really.
Sure. They define first of all a timeline of what is the area of significance and the timeline of significance. So for this one, I forget what it is, but it goes up to like 1945. So it's probably like 1890s, 1880s most likely. So they look in that defined area. what houses were built within that timeline. And that's the development of that neighborhood. And what makes that important is when they were built within the development of that neighborhood. So again, they may not be the most flashy buildings, but they are representative of that time when they were constructed, of that building, of that neighborhood's development. So again, there's many buildings in that neighborhood. It's a very large historic district, blocks and blocks and blocks of buildings. And they're all similar to these buildings in terms of architecture and quality. So that's, you know, how you determine what contributes to that historic district. But we didn't do that ourselves. That was done by private people and done, you know, I wouldn't say at the request of the neighborhood, but somebody wanted to find the area to get that area access to historic tax credits. So that's why that area was done in that manner.
I would argue that the importance of having, what is it, 30, 40 more people move into the area, that would weigh more for me than the appearance of these buildings and whether they're historic or not. Is that something that's been considered at all to this point in this process?
That's considered by the board. Staff just looks at the criteria itself. So when staff looks at that, we just look at what's in the criteria laid out before us. That argument is made to the preservation board. So yeah, and believe me, it was hammered home several times by people who did attend that meeting, that very point. But again, staff doesn't consider that. Staff considers the ordinance, so the criteria.
When determining whether the new structure would add to the walkability of the neighborhood, do you consider the fact that there would be that many more people who would be walking to other neighborhood stores, businesses?
I'm trying to think of the
That's one of the findings of-
walkability.
That's one of the findings of fact as well, is that the new construction would detract from the small scale pedestrian oriented neighborhood.
Sure, I think one of the concerns with the new design was the lack of how the building addressed the street. You have mostly a blank brick wall right at the sidewalk line, and there was a corner space for the office for the building itself. And I think the concern was you have a very large building with very little street presence. It doesn't really invite itself to a very walkable neighborhood when you have this blank wall on the street. So that was one thing that was, you know, considered as an issue with walkability. And also, again, you have buildings on that block, which is what you consider. That block as a whole, 2-story buildings, maybe 3. Now you have a very large monolithic building now at that corner. It does kind of change the feel of that street's walkability.
Okay, understood. Just so I'm sure I got this right, the new structure would have sort of front office on the first floor for part of it, correct?
At the corner, I believe, yes.
Okay, all right, thank you, that's all.
No worries.
Okay,
next-
I have a few questions.
Yeah, you're next. Thank you very much, Commissioner Miller. Go ahead.
So, you talked about the National Register. Where is the boundary for the Oak Hill neighborhood? Does it cross the street Morganford, or it's all on the west side of Morganford?
Sure, the actual boundary, the northern boundary is Arsenal. And again, forgive me, I may botch this, I don't know offhand the entire boundaries, but I do believe it goes all the way over to Grand on the east. And then to the west, I think that's more kind of a jagged line. I don't know, but it goes well past Morganford. It really does encompass all of the homes to the west of Morganford, maybe even over to Kings Highway, but definitely goes much further past this area. And then it goes south down to Filer, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay. And so the Preservation Board denied the application, and it comes to us now, and we're considering whether we want to review it or just accept their recommendation. That'd be the first. I'm trying to understand this, Miriam, from a parliamentary standpoint.
Oh, yeah, of course. So the decision before the Planning Commission tonight is kind of the first step in the 2-step process. And the decision is just whether you want, as a commission, to take another kind of full, complete look at this. So like whether you want to fully take up review. If you decide that as a commission that yes, you would like to, then we will prepare accordingly. It can take a minute, but we'll schedule that at an appropriate future date. If you decide you would not like to, then the applicant has kind of, in terms of this demolition consideration process through the preservation ordinances, they'll have exhausted their kind of administrative opportunities for quote unquote appeal, and they could apply to appeal to circuit court on this specific decision. But if, again, if you all decide to take it up, we would schedule that at some future date. We would do that full review. It would be an extensive discussion, kind of as Bob indicated, Director Bettis indicated. And then the commission would hear it, have 30 days to consider whether to uphold, overturn, or modify the preservation board's decision. So, you know, you could meet, hear it, take a think on it, but you'd have to reassemble within those 30 days unless it's found to be exceedingly complicated. Then that would be a 60-day review period. But once you hear it at some future date, then you would have to decide pretty quickly. But tonight it's just, do you or don't you want to engage in that full review process?
Okay, okay. One question, you mentioned the other building across the street or down the street that was built a few years ago, the MoFo. You have buildings in this district, in this historic district, that don't necessarily fit the historic standard. They were built in the 70s or the 80s, right? Or the 60s even.
Right.
That the obvious analysis by the preservation board would be a lot less stringent on removing some of those buildings with new construction in general, if all things being equal. Saying they're not noxious, they're not impeding traffic, or you know, if they're, especially if they're residential and they're 3 to 4 stories similar to this, and they were in a site where there is a building that definitely doesn't contribute to the historic status of the neighborhood. That's an easier call, I would say.
Correct. I mean, that could even be done at staff level, honestly.
Okay.
Yeah, because
Okay.
that's in the criteria of the ordinance. The ordinance kind of allows flexibility for staff to approve
Right.
buildings that are not, determined a certain way as spelled out in the ordinance as these buildings are.
Right.
Right.
So my second question, and you mentioned this, I just want to go over it one more time. When the developer was turned down and they came back, they didn't come back with any concessions or new ideas or any responses to staff or board discussion? It was just an identical. I mean, that seems
Well, the design itself was the same. Now, you were given in your packets, I do believe, a copy of the applicant's presentation. So that might have been some supplementary information provided to the commissioners. But in terms of the design itself, it was the same.
okay. Okay.
Sorry.
All right.
A little side discussion. Anything else, Commissioner Miller?
No, I'm fine with accepting it as it is.
Okay. Commissioner Williams, questions?
Yeah. So am I correct that these buildings fall within a preservation review district and a National Historic District, but not a preservation review district, which is sort of defined by a National Historic District?
Sure, I'll give you some background. Most of the city is covered under a PRD or that review district, most of the city.
Right.
Within those areas, sometimes you have these historic districts within those review districts.
Right.
They just add essentially a layer of significance to our review. It gives us more direction in terms of individual building significance or a collection of building significance. It just helps us define what we do per the ordinance. So they're on top of each other, basically.
So National Historic designations are then considered sort of parameters for making decisions about preservation review districts.
Exactly, like these being merit buildings. That's actually defined in our ordinance that says if it's.
So the
big- yeah.
National Historic District defines the merit, or what defines the merit? Because if these are two separate designations, what defines the merit
Sure, well, it's.
for the local district?
Well, there's no local district per se. The PRD is the local coverage that gives us our
Gotcha.
review for demolition review. So within the staff report talks about the quality of architecture and how we define what kind of building it is. Is it high merit, contributing, or non-contributing or qualifying? And it states in there, a building is merit if it is listed in the National Register as a building that contributes to that national district. So it spells it out in the ordinance itself. So it just gives staff, a little more direction in terms of how we do our staff reports. I know it's a lot of layers, believe me. Thank goodness it's not a local historic district. There'd be another layer of things all together. So
I guess I just never understood national registrations, historic registrations as like a protective layer.
it's only protective in that, it helps staff know more about each building individually.
Gotcha.
A lot of the research is done, thankfully. So in this district, if you look at the actual nomination, it's lengthy. And they go building by building by building where they define it, they look and try to see who designed it when it was constructed. So it helps staff with background of those buildings. So if it was not a national district, it'd be me trying to look into each building, trying to figure out why it is, has significance or not.
So with that being said, then what was the nature or the basis of the national district registration? Like, was it a
Again,
cultural basis? Like,
it's architecture and
It's
development of that
architectural
neighborhood.
base.
Yeah, there's different criteria. There's A, B, C, and D, different levels of criteria for significance. So kind of give me saying like they seem like very pedestrian buildings, and they are for the most part, but they are representative of that neighborhood. And what you see is a predominant style throughout that neighborhood. Very basic buildings. Totally get it. That is the basis for that significance for that Oak Hill Historic District.
Let me
So-
just add a comment to that, interrupt you, I'm sorry, that
go ahead.
those districts, the historic districts are formed usually by the people in the neighborhood. The neighborhoods request, and there's a legislative process to be designated as a historic district. And that's usually a political and neighborhood community process that takes over several years. And the point of it is either to preserve the built infrastructure or to preserve the history of some cultural event that happened at that location. And I think there are others too, but primarily that's how they come into being, to protect the built environment there that the neighborhood and the community feels that's important.
And
Sure.
this one in particular was also to access historic tax credits. This in 2010, 2011, it's a big motivator to do rehabilitation. So I know that was a big part of getting this area listed as well.
So so you're saying that this registration details the contributing merit of each building?
Yes.
It does. Is that information provided anywhere?
I don't believe you were all ever
Respect.
given like a actual copy or a link to that actual document. In the staff report, each building was kind of described. The year it was built, and then there was a description of it architecturally in the staff report. Again, I don't believe you were given a link to that Oak Hill Historic District Registry or not. I don't believe you were.
So the use of the National Historic Registration as sort of the parameters of decision-making of Crow or the Preservation Review Board is discretionary.
Well, not for Crow, because it's defined very firmly in the ordinance, the level of each building. It says specifically in our ordinance, if the building contributes to that historic district, it is a merit building. It says
Local historic district or national?
National Historic District and local. Actually, it says local or national in the ordinance. But this is a national district, so it's.
Okay.
Director, would you just refresh everybody on how a national district gets created and how a local district?
Sure. First, there's two kinds.
Where I'm really getting at is what is the involvement of an ordinance in either of those?
Yeah. So for this kind of district, for a national registered district, there is no local ordinance involved. This is strictly done at the state and national level. This is not done, in any kind of mechanism with the city of St. Louis itself. Okay, this is strictly done, again, usually when you have areas this large, that's done to try to get those incentives to help rehab. So national districts, they're defined areas, you have a significance, you usually hire an outside consultant to prepare those documents like this was done. And they hold neighborhood meetings just to kind of at least get folks to know what's going on, because there really is no extra layer of review, in all honesty. It's just a matter of it's all in a PRD, so we review it regardless if it's in a national district or not. Okay, so again, no local involvement with the national district, unless there's something, well, not this. A local historic district is where you have a neighborhood level desire to be a historic district that controls the exterior of people's buildings and also the design of new construction. Local historic districts like Shaw, Soulard, Lafayette Square, Hyde Park, those areas are done locally, legislatively through the alderperson, and very, very intense working with the neighborhood themselves to define those design guidelines, to define those areas in particular. So that is the complete different, these two districts, national and local.
Then the ancillary part of that is preservation review as a geography is authorized by local ordinance. And when such a review is looking at properties that are in the National Register District, they get to use the resources of what's presented in the National Register District as part of their evaluation.
So is it the registration that is it the registration or the contributing merit in the registration that called out this block face as the important thing about this building?
Well, there are 18 points in the ordinance that we look at. So it's not just the buildings themselves. So there are 18 points we go through to actually, come up with our conclusions and our recommendations to the board, and the board considers all those points.
Yep.
So it's not just as one thing. As I said before, if we get to the next stage, I will go point by point, but it does discuss things like, reuse potential for the building's soundness, the existing building's soundness, those buildings, character architecturally, hardship, any kind of hardship economically. There are points that we have to look at point by point. So, really, really quickly, of those 18 points, staff believed and firmly believe that 9 of those criteria were not met. So of 18, 9 were not met, 6 were not applicable, and then 2 to 3 maybe complied. So majority of those 18 points were not met. So it's not just the buildings themselves. They're taken into a broader context of what's around it.
And one more question, may not be for you, but at this point in the review process, are the conditions as defined by like a sloop in the zoning code, are they considered? As for the existing structures and the new structure, maybe even how the two compare to one.
Yeah, there's not Bob, please correct whatever. There's not a formal kind of legislative or ordinance tie between those two things. I think, the Preservation Board's review was in response to an appeal of staff's decision. So my understanding is the Planning Commission would take on a similar role, that it could be exposed to the whole record that was made available during that review, where a range of, additional themes beyond what was enumerated in that ordinance, the criteria that Bob described, is kind of review that evidence and discussion beyond those 18 criteria. I think that was the first part of your question. Anything you want to add on the zoning front?
I mean, zoning is one question in the, that we do consider, to comply with zoning or not. So that is one of the criteria we do look at, that it meets zoning. So does the proposal meet current zoning? That's part of the consideration as well.
Any other questions from the, were you done? Yeah, okay. Any other questions from the commissioners? No? I actually have a couple more for you. So I have to agree with Commissioner Jorgensen. For me, that there's an aesthetic discordance between the buildings, which is what it makes me wonder is, was there ever a different building on that corner lot that the setbacks were then consistent and, you know, we've frozen this at a moment in time, but is that representing something different from what was there earlier?
Probably not. I mean, that's probably what was there. I mean, this is '03, and I'm gonna gather, knowing how the city developed that way, that's probably what was there. Yeah, most likely.
Remind me, the dates on the three buildings are,
'01, so in the corner, 1901, the commercial building in the middle is 1901, and then the building next door is 1895.
okay,
Yeah.
good to know. Let's see. And was there input given to the developer, and I'm sorry if I'm repeating someone else's question, for modifications, you described some of the concerns about the brick face on the building.
Mhm.
So was there any input given to modify the design that would be more acceptable?
Right, that was asked previously by,
That's what I,
Commissioner
and the
Fowler.
answer was.
I
it
am
was before your
unaware.
Time.
Yes, I was unaware of, yes.
So but this latest decision, nothing, that wasn't part of the discussion in the latest decision.
Again, there was the same proposals both times, and I am unaware of, and the applicant is here, maybe you can talk about anything input from our office, but I am unaware of any kind of discussions with the applicant to try and modify the proposal or not. I am unaware.
And last question, am I right that that was a 3-2 decision by the Preservation Board?
Yes.
Okay, all right. One abstention. Yeah. Right. Anyone prepared to make a motion? Oh, you want to make some comment?
What did you just ask for?
I asked if anyone was prepared to make a motion, or do you want to make some comments first?
I'll make some comments. Carefully. So we're making a decision today, having gone through the preservation board, heard World's intention from Bob. And it's really, at this point, you get to say, they've been to the preservation board.
Hey, Don, I can't hear you too well.
Oh, as I see that I don't have a working microphone. This one's live. So to try to make it relatively simple is on no other matter before the preservation board does the applicant have a chance to go to a second review within the city. The preservation board is a quasi-judicial board. It makes the determination that is the last administrative act on the process, with the exception of this one. It stayed as the final decision until we either make a decision tonight or the subsequent one. Meaning tonight, we have the option, which is, let's take it one more chance at before you guys having another look at it. You make a determination at that time. That determination is then the binding one. And your determination can be, again, to deny the permit, to approve the permit, or do a modification in some fashion. That's what happened there. If in your deliberation today, you say, nope, this is the end of the road before the city, we're going to deny the ticket up, and David, then they have the avenue to go to court. So, they have the avenue to go to court after we write up the actions of this board tonight. Yeah. Otherwise, they would not have the avenue to go to court until after you guys rule on it. Rule on it is my generic way of saying, you take another look at it, agree, disagree, or modify.
I'm sorry, this is my first time here. Is there room for discussion? Is that how
For the discussion, yes.
Yeah, David will modify us if we go too far.
Yeah, I guess I just reminded, I know it was mentioned already, but at no point do you get to take new evidence. You're really just doing a review.
Understood.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And the evidence will include transcripts and things like that.
Okay, I would just point out that there's tax revenue, which is involved or included in this report, which we're looking at $800,000 in tax revenue for the city alone. That's leaving out school districts and other governments. That's over 20 years compared to 36,000 as the building stand. That's a massive amount of money that we would be saying no to by not looking into this further. Additionally, one of the perhaps the most important issue for the city at this time or for the past 70 years is to turn around population decline. This would add, I think it says in here, up to about 50 additional residents, or at least some of them would be coming from outside of the city. We haven't heard all these 18 criteria. I would like to hear them one by one. I think we would be doing a disservice to the city by not taking this up for review.
Want to make a motion?
One more point of clarification. They won't be able to make any changes to anything. We'll just be reviewing again what has been shown twice. Okay, just wanted.
You'll be going in a deep dive on what was the last presentation and outcome. And that deep dive means you'll have transcripts, you'll have line by line things, and you can compare, oh, here's the transcript, here's the written materials, and then you either uphold the denial, reverse the denial, or there's a wiggle room where there could be some type of modification that you recommend.
Understood.
Are we ready for a motion?
And let's, just for another thing, we've done this about 20 times in our existence, but just want to make clear, there's been some comments about they got to hear by having a action at the preservation board being consummated in the next minutes, then it triggered a time for them to ask be before us. They made everything in that time period, so we're here tonight. If Miriam, you gave this summary of if we say no, we don't see it anymore, when we do the minutes, they can go to court. But just outline again that if we say we're taking it up, it will come before come before you in a forthcoming meeting.
That's right. Yeah, we'll need a minute as staff to pull together that full and complete record that was before the preservation board, so that's available. There's no clock on when we have to take up that review if you all decide to do it. But once we do take up review, that whole record will be made available to you. The commission will engage in deliberation, and then following that deliberation, you'll have 30 days to issue a decision.
So, one clarifying question.
Oh, no.
We are voting on whether or not to take up review, and we're voting on when to take up review?
Just whether or not to.
Oh, okay. But if we vote on whether or not to take up review, then there's a determination on when to do it.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right. Balancing against, I mean, how long it'll take to do a proper job of it and any number of other things going on. Yeah.
Based on the number of questions and comments of my fellow commissioners, I'd like to make a motion to take up a review.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All right. Commissioner Garamendi made the motion. Oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner Fowler made the second. Call for a vote.
Alderwoman Clark Hubbard.
Could you repeat yourself?
With Garble, could you say one more time?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Commissioner Fowler,
Nay. No.
Commissioner Garmendia,
Aye.
Commissioner Miller,
No.
Commissioner Jorgensen,
Aye.
Commissioner Williams,
Aye.
Chair Boaz.
Abstain.
So you have. 4 ayes, 2 nays, and 1 abstention.
David, you verify that?
Yes.
All right. So we will be reviewing this decision at a future meeting, the date to be scheduled.
Take a deep breath. Like I said, in our 20 years existence, we've done this about 20 times, so it is a serious matter. The other little context I will say is our court system doesn't move very fast, and you know, as the applicant steps out, he might be reminded of that. That the court system doesn't move very fast on these things, so if they were to go to court today, it's an open book when they get that resolution. What Marion was saying is, we're not reconvening in a special meeting next week, but we do have regular monthly meetings, and we would take it up, do the second bite relatively short, and then we'll see the outcome of that.
Okay, we have one final action item. That is permission to schedule the public hearing for the strategic land use plan.
I'll make this quick. I know people are, and do what you gotta, do what you gotta. But so at the last month's meeting, we provided a detailed update on the strategic land use plan, where it stands. And requested, as we do, kind of the courtesy of requesting the planning commission's permission for us to notice up for a formal public presentation of it and public hearing for it as part of the formal adoption process. Last month, the planning commission felt like, whoa, this is a lot to take in, big complicated plan. Let's continue this item to the next agenda. So here we are now. And we engaged in a work session with commissioners who are able and interested in attending earlier this week and shared a kind of internal early draft of the full plan document. That was a great work session. And we'll be making updates accordingly to the content within the plan, and commissioners are still reviewing. But tonight, just want to kind of return to this continued action item of requesting planning commission approval for us to notice up kind of the formal adoption proceedings of the strategic land use plan element of the comprehensive plan at a future meeting. I think last time I know we said January. I think now we're not thinking January, we're thinking February, just so we can kind of fully, in a measured way, take in the comments from the planning commission, as well as our steering committee and working groups, and then have a kind of comfortable public review period after we formally post the draft.
Questions from the commissioners at this point? Not going to go through the list thinking there might not be any. All right, hearing no questions, do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to provide public notice for conducting a presentation and public hearing. Do I say the month? Or just?
You don't have to, at a future meeting.
Sure.
Second.
Motion for Commissioner Garmendia, second from Commissioner Williams. Call for vote.
Alderwoman Clark Hubbard,
Aye.
Commissioner Fowler,
Aye.
Commissioner Garmendia, Commissioner Jorgensen,
Aye.
Commissioner Miller,
Aye.
Commissioner Williams,
Aye.
Chair Boaz.
Aye.
Motion passed without present voting aye.
Thank you.
Miriam, that's the last of the action items.
Yeah, and if one element of a comprehensive plan wasn't enough for you, got an update on another that's in process. That's the last of the action items. Yeah.
Pardon?
Yes.
Okay. Good evening, commissioners. Nice to see everybody. As Miriam said, the next item is but an informational item. Going to be talking a little bit about the work to date on the city's transportation mobility plan. I keep reminding folks, we don't have a transportation plan today that covers the whole city. We are building this from scratch. But we are also thinking, especially now that the SLOOP process has gotten as far as it's gotten, nearing completion, about how to link these two things together, how to pick up on themes related to mobility that are in the SLOOP process and expand on them in the TMP. But also, of course, most of the work in the TMP is kind of, native to that process itself. So to give most of the update, the project manager, the consultant side, Jackie Knight is here. Did I introduce myself? I forgot to.
Were you?
For the record, my name is Scott Ogilvy, Program Manager with City's Planning and Urban Design Agency. But I was just introducing Jackie Knight, who works for Crawford Murphy Tilley, CMT, who's the lead consultant working with the city on the transportation and mobility plan. Jackie?
All right.
Will you be within James's 7 minutes or beyond?
I will be more than 7 minutes, so yeah, James. A lot of material to cover, but thank you commissioners for having me tonight. As Scott mentioned, my name's Jackie Knight. I am a project manager at Crawford Murphy and Tilley, and we are leading the City of St. Louis Transportation and Mobility Plan. Looks like the view page. Okay.
Snowstorm.
Okay. There
Disrupted
we
all
go.
transit. Yeah. There we go.
Okay. All right. So tonight we are going to talk about what we have accomplished so far. We actually kicked off the plan in March 2024, and we have been hard at work since then, engaging the public and making progress on several different plan elements. We'll then get into the plan elements that will be included in the transportation and mobility plan. And from here on out in the presentation, I'll probably be referring to it as the TMP because it's a little bit easier to roll off the tongue as we're talking about all the items. And then specific to elements that the Planning Commission might be most interested in, we're going to talk about our street design framework and give an introduction into that plan element. And then we'll also talk about our policy and ordinance review. And then we will wrap up with the 2025 schedule for the project. So the plan elements of the TMP include, tonight we're going to talk about our public engagement in our online survey and statistically valid survey. So we'll give a briefing on that. We're also doing an assets and benchmarking task item, a component of the plan that will look at, where we exist today with our existing data that we use to make infrastructure decisions. How are we benchmarking where we are today? And then also identifying gaps for data that we should be collecting in order to make more informed decisions moving forward. Another component of the plan is a safety action plan, and this is focusing on roadways that have higher proportions of serious injuries and fatalities as a way to try to minimize, as a way to focus investments on minimizing those injuries and fatalities for a safer roadway system. We'll talk about our street design framework and then our policy and ordinance review. So the items that you see with the boxes around them are, again, what we're going to be focusing on tonight, as those are probably a little bit more interest to the Planning Commission at the state of the plan right now. So what have we accomplished so far? We have done a lot of engagement on this project. The clicker stopped working. Oh, there we go. Okay. So since July, between our online community survey that we also had available at pop-up demonstration or at pop-up events, neighborhood meetings, and our open houses, and we also completed a statistically significant survey that was administered through a research firm that Vector Communications used, we've had nearly 1,600 total survey responses. We also had an online mapping tool available that individuals could go online and map routes where they currently bike, routes where they don't bike because they don't feel safe, or routes where they wish biking connections existed between community assets. We had 90 participants at our 4 open houses that we held at unique geographic areas around the city of St. Louis. We did 23 pop-ups, so we went to neighborhood festivals, block parties, neighborhood night out to just really try to meet people where they were. We also did 9 presentations to various groups around the city that invited us to come present, and then of course our 4 open houses. In addition to the public engagement, we have been meeting with city staff from multiple departments through a series of meetings. So in April, we held a values alignment workshop where we met with representatives from Planning and Urban Design Agency, Board of Public Service, Streets Department, Parks Department, multiple departments where we started talking about why are we making the infrastructure investments that we're making, and what are our values around these infrastructure investments? And I'll get into some of those results in a few slides. We also did a very similar workshop with partner agencies like Metro Transit, Great Rivers Greenway, East West Gateway Council of Governments, and the Missouri Department of Transportation, as those agencies maintain, own, operate infrastructure in the city of St. Louis. In addition, we've been working with the Universal Design Group that David Newberger from the Office of the Disabled convenes, and we've actually held 3 Universal Design Group meetings to share information about the plan and get feedback about mobility for people living with disabilities in the city of St. Louis. We also held a dedicated safety action plan workshop with city staff to review what's known as a high injury network and start talking about countermeasures and implementation of those countermeasures on our city streets. Just last week, we held a policy and ordinance review workshop with city staff where we shared our existing research, and I'll get more into that later, and then started talking about what policy solutions should we be thinking about. We brought forward benchmarks from other cities for city staff to consider. And then we've also done a lot of components of our street design framework. Actually, the picture that you see on the slide here is we walked 9 miles around the city in 3 unique neighborhoods where we started basically gut testing what our existing street design framework and definitions were, and really going out in the field and seeing, are we capturing all St. Louis street types? And, what does this feel like? What are inputs that we can take back? So we are in a lengthy review process of that plan element. Here's just some pictures of our open houses. We had great attendance. We had all types of activities, including activities for children, as you can see, asking them how they like to travel around the city of St. Louis, and we received really good participation at these. So when I talk about our street design values, the team provided a word bank of approximately 12 values, and we asked individuals to identify what are their top 3 values around infrastructure decision-making. Examples you can see on the slide here, like safety, connectivity, maintenance, equity, accessibility, innovation, economic development. Those are just a few of the other ones that were included. So from our open houses, the responses that we got, you can see safety is a top value, followed by equity, and then followed by accessibility in terms of connections, meaning that people would like to be able to travel more seamlessly between destinations that they're traveling within the city of St. Louis. Within our community survey, safety was the #1 value, followed by connectivity, and then followed by maintenance and quality. So thinking about the upkeep of what our streets and sidewalks look like. And then in our statistically significant survey, which I might just pause here quickly to share why we did the statistically significant survey. We know that people that are opting into the community survey are likely more invested in the topic, or more in tune with things that are happening online, and make it a point to go out of their day to fill out the survey. We really wanted to make sure that we had a representative sample of City of St. Louis residents, which is why we did the statistically significant survey. I'm going to go through some survey responses, and it's been really informative to compare the results that we saw across the 2. But from our statistically significant survey, you can see actually 2 of those values are similar, with safety being the top value, maintenance and quality, and healthy neighborhoods. And then from our street design values with city staff and partner agencies, our top 4 for city staff are safety, equity, mobility, and economy. And then our partner agency values, the top 3 are safety, equity, and accessibility. So the ones that have been highlighted in green are re-emerging themes that will certainly be captured in the final plan document, as key, basically North Stars or pillars of the plan outcomes and recommendations. So for our community survey, we had a little over 1,200 participants. 81% of respondents were City of St. Louis residents, and they represent 43 zip codes. And then the map on the screen is the zip code distribution of participants of our statistically significant survey. So we did get a fairly good distribution of respondents there. We had 327 participants that took that survey, and they're all City of St. Louis residents, and that represents a 90% confidence level in the results. So the next series of slides is going to be questions that we asked. I'm going to compare community survey results with statistically significant survey results. It's a lot of information. I'm going to try to get through it quickly, but it is a lot of information to share. So one of the first questions we asked was, what issues do you face when traveling around the city of St. Louis using personal modes of transportation? You can see on the screen in green the top responses in the community survey that all received over 50%. Other drivers, so reckless driving, red light running, lack of maintenance, lack of dedicated bike lanes, construction impacts, and lack of connected sidewalks were the top responses. Yeah,
Was that how it was asked? Lack of dedicated bike lanes or trails?
Yes.
Is that saying those two things are similar?
I think it's saying that those two things provide a separated space for bicyclists, but in terms of facility design, that is different. But it's basically a separated space from motor vehicle traffic. One thing I want to point out on this slide, though, that you see, you know, safety and maintenance were the top 3 values, and then the 2 issues faced in the community survey are both in alignment with what people are responding their values are for infrastructure. From the statistically significant survey, other drivers, so reckless driving, red light running, again, the #1 issue, lack of maintenance also in the top, and then construction impacts are also in the top, but only 3 responses got over 50%. 2 things that are interesting to note is that lack of connected sidewalks was also high in the community survey, but not as high, over 50% in the statistically significant survey. And then cost of a personal vehicle was a little bit higher in the responses under 50% than the community survey. So again, thinking about how the statistically significant survey is more representative of all people living in the city of St. Louis. Another question we asked is if people have ever been involved in a traffic crash in the city of St. Louis. So from our community survey, the percentages are not on here, but I think it's like 48% or so had been involved in a traffic crash, and about 52% had not been involved in a traffic crash, but still a lot of people being impacted by traffic crashes. And then when you look at the statistically significant survey, the number of people involved in a traffic crash actually gets higher. So a little over 50% responded that they had been involved in a traffic crash, and a little under 50% responded that no, they had not been involved in a traffic crash.
Is that normal?
When we got these results, we actually felt like it seemed pretty high. When you think about 50% of the people living in the city of St. Louis have involved in a traffic crash. Now, we'll get to the next question. Actually, this could be like a minor crash, property damage only, something like that. But so one of the more eye-opening questions for our team is we asked, have you or a loved one, you know, a family member, a friend, this is exactly how we phrased it, suffered life-altering injury or death because of a traffic crash? And I actually had these percentages memorized because I was so alarmed by it when I saw it, to be quite honest. But our community survey, 21% of people that took that survey responded that they have, in fact, had a family member that has been seriously injured or died as a result of a traffic crash in the city of St. Louis. And then in our statistically significant survey, actually 24% of people responded that they have had a family member, a loved one, suffer life-altering injury or death as a result of a traffic crash.
Just to clarify, the other question you showed did say specifically in the city of St. Louis. This one, at least on the slide, doesn't. Did you ask specifically about the city or just in general?
It did say in the city of St. Louis. It's just not on that side, but yeah, good question. Okay. So then we also asked about what is your level of agreement with the following statement? And that the statement is, I feel the city of St. Louis meets the mobility needs of children traveling on its streets and sidewalks. So 80% of community survey participants either strongly disagree or disagree that the city of St. Louis is currently meeting the mobility needs of children living in our city or traveling on streets and sidewalks. And 56% of respondents in the statistically significant survey either strongly disagree or disagree. So right there, you can see some of the differences between the 2 surveys, but still looking at the results overall, you know, over 50% of the people that are living in the city are responding that the city of St. Louis they disagree that the city of St. Louis meets the mobility needs of children traveling on streets and sidewalks. And then these questions, similar to the traffic crash questions that we've just really never asked before, like Scott mentioned, we don't have a transportation plan. We asked about people's willingness to experience slightly slower travel times, just holistically. Typically when, you know, we're taking projects like road diets or roadway reconfigurations out to the public, we're asking people to respond to very specific details on roadways that they might feel a very personal investment in. And so we kind of took it a step back and asked this question: I would be willing to experience slightly slower travel speeds when driving at certain times if overall reckless driving decreased. And 90% of community respondents, so strongly agree or agree, said that yes, they would be willing to experience slower travel times. and then 74%. So again, you can see that difference between the statistically significant and the community survey, but still almost 3/4 of the people living in the city say they would be willing to experience slower travel speeds if it meant that overall reckless driving decreased. And then the next question, similar to that, but the question is about, I would be willing to experience slightly slower travel speeds at certain times of day if it meant more people could travel comfortably who do not have access to own or operate a car. So again, this is thinking about a trade-off for neighbors, friends, other people that are living in the city. And 91% of community respondents said that yes, they would be willing to experience slower travel speeds for others that don't have access to own or operate a car to travel more safely and comfortably. And 76% of statistically significant survey responses said yes, the same. So again, a little bit of variation there between the two, but you can still see that overall, yes, people, safety is a top value, accessibility is a top value, and people's responses to these questions are really lining up with how they identified their values within the survey process. And then we also asked about what kind of improvements would you prioritize if you were in charge of transportation planning in the city of St. Louis? So similar to Commissioner Williams' question about bike connections and trails kind of being lumped together, it's more so speaking to just a separated space for biking. Community survey, that was number 1, followed by improve roadway safety, which again speaks to that safety value, and then improve major roadways like Kings Highway, Grand, Page, also speaking to safety, but of course, maintenance and operations of what these major roadways are like. And then in the statistically significant survey, improve major roadways was number 1, followed by improve roadway safety, and then maintain existing infrastructure. All right, so that was a very quick overview of our survey results with some open house and initial workshop results. So now we're going to talk about our street design framework. So this is Street Design Framework 101. This is something that will be brand new to the city of St. Louis, but is not uncommon to other major cities or metropolitan areas around the United States. It's actually kind of a newer way of doing things that I think a lot of places are adopting. But so what is a street design framework? It's a vision, a map, and a set of tools that describe how each street in St. Louis should be designed, prioritized, and realized. So these are designed to meet the mobility needs of all people, regardless of their ability or mode of travel. So people walking, biking, connecting to transit. These streets the design is prioritized to improve safety, access, comfort, equity, and resilience for all people. And then most importantly, it's also realized in a way that supports adjacent land uses, including residents, business, parks, neighborhoods, and institutions. So we're not thinking about streets anymore as just pass-through places and neighborhoods. We're thinking them about places that really connect, really can serve as the fabric of neighborhoods in the city. So that's exactly what this slide says. Historically, transportation planning has been so focused on vehicular efficiency and what's known as roadway functional classification and moving cars throughout a system. But now the trend is really moving towards a context-in look. And so how are we designing a street that better supports adjacent land uses? And who are we really designing that street for? And it's probably not for the motor vehicle traffic that's moving through the neighborhood or throughout the corridor. So this is a vision for St. Louis streets that will define how we want our streets to look and feel and operate. There'll certainly be a component of protecting vulnerable road users. As we've seen, safety continues to emerge as an important theme, managing safety for all travelers, prioritizing infrastructure investments across the city, and then also making tough trade-offs when right-of-way is limited. And on some city streets, we do have limited right-of-way. On other city streets, we have a lot of right-of-way, but this approach will really help us balance what those trade-offs when a street or a project comes up for a roadway redesign. So the design framework will be accompanied with a map, and on here you can see a map of one of our early iterations and the definitions for each street. So there'll be a set of street definitions that will go alongside a map, or each block in the city of St. Louis will be assigned a definition. And that definition on that street will consider current and future land use patterns along the streets, as well as desired street conditions such as speed, traffic volumes, road width, and mode of travel to accommodate. Also included in the street design framework is a set of tools. So checklists, processes, guidelines, and graphic examples for how to make decisions about street design. This is not engineering design standards. So of course, there will certainly have to be an engineering design process as projects are being delivered. But this is a toolkit basically that can help the city better scope projects when thinking about budgeting and future investments. So the matrix that's hard to read on the screen has one of our earlier iterations of our street definitions. Across the side and across the top, there's things like desired traffic volumes, desired posted speed, even things like modal hierarchy and what should that street include, for example, if this is a street that we want to prioritize bicycling on. So we're just going to show two examples. Certainly don't want to get into the weeds of all of the details of the street design. You know, we'll be doing that when we come back at future meetings. We're still very much in this process. Actually, right now, we are in the process of reviewing our draft definitions. I think we're actually probably in about our 6th or 7th iteration of those definitions and map. And our team is actually out field investigating every single block in the city of St. Louis for how the existing definitions feel. So this is a very long review process that we are going through right now. So we're going to share two examples of that. But example number 1 on here is a neighborhood Main Street. And so what this might look like is mixed use with active commercial frontage, vibrant and pedestrian friendly. So thinking about people from the neighborhood that are really walking to that main street to go to places, but then also going, you know, having a mix of residential, and then medium traffic with lower traffic speeds. So then there's a key characteristics you can see from posted speed limit to right-of-way width, traffic volumes, land use context, and street function. We've got a couple examples on the screen here. That would just be what our current draft map is showing these as neighborhood main streets. And then we also have a district main street. So again, we show the key characteristics, just thoughts about the district main street. So vibrant and pedestrian oriented, commercial uses, prioritize movement for pedestrians and cyclists, and then also public transit. So again, thinking a little bit more about a larger draw for who might be coming to those streets. And we have some examples on the screen here. In addition to our street design framework, again, like I said, we're very much in that process. We are in the process of field investigating every single block in the city and really refining those definitions. We're also very much in the process of our policy and ordinance review right now. Last week, we held a workshop with city staff right here in this room. Where we shared information that was basically a compilation of staff interviews. We did about 18 different staff interviews this summer with multiple departments and asked about specific policies or processes that are impacting project delivery. We also got input from the public survey and open houses as it relates to this plan element. We also got information from steering committee meetings, and then the workshop where we shared what our 5 themes were. So in addition to the existing research, we've also started the process of identifying benchmarks from other cities that we might consider to bring back to the city of St. Louis as options for either new policy solutions or revisions to existing policies and ordinances. But the 5 themes that we've grouped these policies, this plan element into is number 1 is capital budgeting, planning and programming and services. Number 2 is traffic safety, traffic calming and enforcement. The next one is development and private construction. So thinking about how that interacts with the public right of way. And then also asset management and data sharing, and then community engagement. So these are the 5 buckets. And within each of these buckets, there's a whole host of existing policy and ordinances that we are reviewing. And then we'll be looking for benchmarks. We obviously can't get into every single mobility related policy that we have in St. Louis, but we'll be fine tuning it, prioritizing some of the more important ones to think about revising text and providing recommendations for as an outcome of this process. So to wrap it up, on our 2025 schedule, one of our initial components that we're working on completing is our safety action plan. We had a lot of information to build off from East West Gateway's regional safety action plan. So we will be submitting a draft of that to the city in February. And that will actually be attached to the transportation and mobility plan. That will be something that will have to be updated annually. And maybe not annually, but there's a lot of specifics still to figure out there. We're going to be submitting our draft street design framework or working through the draft map that we're ready to share with the public and bring to a wider group of stakeholders in March. We'll then go back to the public. We have just the exact same amount of pop-ups and open houses and meetings scoped for the second half of the project. So we'll be doing that in April and May 2025. In May 2025, we'll have our draft policy revisions and recommendations, and then we'll be submitting a draft of the TMP in June 2025 to start, working through that and think about the adoption process at the end of the summer. I think with that, we have our website, and if I missed anything, Scott, certainly add, or we can take questions.
Excellent job, Jackie. Thank you very much. I think I just want to sort of summarize by mentioning where we are. So we've done this big public input process in this kind of general way, which we have never really been able to do as a city before. We're kind of in the midst of all working through all the different plan elements and sections. And so there's really no conclusions in any of those yet, but they are all actively being worked through. And we are, of course, attempting to connect that public input, that staff input that we've had, to kind of set these North Stars, as Jackie said, and then align the work we're doing underneath those North Stars. So that's where we are at in the process.
I'll make a couple comments. One, Rich Bradley, the president of the Board of Public Service, is celebrating a milestone birthday today. So he's not here with us, and joined with us tonight. Second, Jackie and I have been on a national stage at the American Planning Association conference, where a transportation-related plan won a national award that she had created. All a good thing. As we mentioned, some of the resources that we have in the city to be thinking about this, one that Jackie certainly mentioned is the Office of the Disabled. It's a very important perception it's a very important ingredient in all this, because their perception of things are very much being able to be explained and promoted in the types of things that we're doing. Second, you also remember sometime earlier this year, Scott, you were here with Bi-State, and we developed and approved the minimum operating segment for the Green Line expansion. One of the exhibits that was used in that was a map of census block groups with the percentage on those block groups of people that did not have access to motor vehicles. It's an important part of this, which I lead towards an element that at this workshop that Jackie was talking about. I made a point about some other aspects of our community. One, sustainability, and related to all this. One of the things that we did with one of our sustainability efforts is we got a grant for electric vehicles for a senior outfit to shuttle senior citizens in areas of the city to their medical appointments and do shopping. So that's important, and it's part of the challenge I gave the group, is that there are people that don't have cars. There are a key thing that I think about in terms of this mobility is some of the things is getting mobility to your jobs, but also getting products and things to you. And the city is experiencing a decline of pharmacies across the city. You can't go too far without seeing a vacant Walgreens. And one of the things that SLDC has done is there's a private pharmacy in the Delmar Divine building, and they do deliveries. And they do deliveries slightly different, is it's to different parts of the city on a given day. So you ask for your prescription a little bit further in advance, but it will come to you and come to your home and that prescription without you needing to go to there. And that's part of a grant program. So I'm hoping as we get to the end of this, as we talked about in the SLOOP, there are some ancillary aspects of things that go into this loop, that there should be some ancillary things that are mentioned in the transportation and mobility plan that helps improve our neighborhoods. Thanks. It's exciting.
Thank you. Let's start with the commissioners who are online. Any questions from either Alderwoman Clark Hubbard or Commissioner Miller? I'm going to take that silence as a no. Oh,
Well, I have a question. I
Okay.
was gonna let the Alderwoman go first, so.
go right ahead.
Okay, so, maybe I missed it, but I know you were going fast and you're high level. But what about, I didn't hear much about technology in streets in terms of, communication, synchronization, lighting programs and, camera technology and just data collection and, the response of the environment. So in terms of the infrastructure, so just about technology, um, I'm sure that's in there somewhere. So what can you say briefly about that?
Yeah, so I think there is a lot of opportunity within the city for us to sort of better collect and share data across departments. So that's definitely an aspect. And, I have the sense that we have really a fair amount of capacity to do that in the city right now across many departments, but we don't always have, the direction for what departments are really supposed to be sharing with each other. So that is an element of this planning process. I think when we talk about getting into, technology in the road, sort of in the street, out in the world, I will say, interestingly, that tended not to score very high amongst survey respondents. That was a question we asked. I think part of the reason is just because those things that did score high, those aspects like safety and like maintenance are so, I think, tangible to residents. In those survey questions about, how many people know somebody closely who's been seriously injured or killed in a crash, it's really a large percentage. And I think that's where people's top priorities are. But I also think that there is an opportunity as we sort of maybe adjust the capital planning process, I would say, or provide recommendations on how to adjust the capital planning process. I think there's many opportunities in that to deploy technology or add technology into future projects. And some of that is happening right now with projects the city currently has, for sure.
Okay, let's just informally go to the commissioners in the room.
I'll be brief. I'm a member of the CAC, the community, oh man. I'm blanking. Advisory, yeah.
And thank
sorry.
you, Commissioner Fowler, for volunteering for that.
No, yeah. And I've been to a lot of the Green Line things also, events. I think a lot of the feedback that was received and I voiced, and this isn't a criticism of St. Louis City, but a lot of the things were like building a baseline. So the safety, the maintenance, and those other things did score higher. Being on the cutting edge with technology, and those other things weren't as high of a priority because a lot of the people just wanted to see a good baseline of being safe, new trails, just creating good basics, So I'd like that comment from Commissioner Miller, but just to give some light there. No questions. You guys know my answers or questions from you guys.
I'm just curious how all this works with BODOT and the roads that they have some jurisdiction over.
Yeah, so MoDOT, through a maintenance agreement, the city of St. Louis and Missouri Department of Transportation, MoDOT does not own any surface streets in St. Louis, but they maintain, it's either 6 or 7, I forget the major arterials in the city. And so I think the place where this has a direct interface with MoDOT is a lot of times MoDOT will, without sort of affirmative direction from municipalities, they're kind of running on autopilot a little bit in terms of how they're doing maintenance or doing improvements. They want municipalities to provide design direction to them in advance so that, because they plan far out in advance, everything they maintain is on like kind of a 12-year schedule. And so they want to know well in advance, what types of things does the city want in these corridors so that as they budget way out in advance, they have a sense of what those are so they can budget for them. If you ask them at the last minute for something, they can never do it because that funding was programmed 4 years ago and now it's too late. So the sooner we as a city can communicate, and that's what that street design framework is really all about. And there's more to the street design framework. There'll be, like future bike facility routes will be a component of that. Obviously, there's streets where transit is a priority, like Jefferson Parnell. But sending those signals to MoDOT, but other partner agencies like Great Rivers Greenway, I think really helps everybody plan further out in advance and deliver things that our residents in the city are asking for.
And you don't touch the highways at all?
We're not really addressing highways, no. They are owned and managed by MoDOT. The one area where there is some overlap, I don't know if you're familiar with MoDOT's Future 64 planning effort, but there are places in the city where MoDOT can potentially shrink sort of legacy highway infrastructure, and it can have a smaller footprint. And the city has done a couple of significant projects with MoDOT already, and I think we want to continue doing those. Each of those requires their own sort of massive, like federal highways compliant planning efforts. But I think this plan will kind of highlight some areas where there's potential in the future to shrink the highway footprint and turn land back over to other uses.
One question. And I wish I could remember the exact question, but you had the relatively similar survey answers on the accidents and a loved one being in an accident between the two groups. But then after that, there was a question that I think in my memory was assessing how people thought the city was doing in providing a safe transportation system. And there was a big difference between the all citizen, what do you call it, the statistical group and the
Yeah.
other group. And I just wondered what you thought was driving that huge difference, given the experience between the two with accidents was relatively similar.
Yes, I think that question was maybe specifically on meeting the needs of children traveling. That's where, yeah. And I also want to say, we asked more questions. We didn't put the responses to every question up, but there's other survey questions as well. I don't know the particular reason, but I'll say that if you look at the community survey, it trends younger, it trends whiter, it trends, I think people who are maybe like more invested in sort of local urban planning or transportation planning. And so might just come with a different viewpoint. And that's really the reason we wanted to open it up to everybody to participate, but we didn't want to just hang our hat on that. And I think it sort of validates the purpose of doing this when there's a lot of alignment, but there are some places where there is a distinction between a more demographically representative sample, how they feel about things. There were no cases where like one group was like 90% over here and the other group was 10%. They tended to be pretty close to like moderately different, I would say.
I just felt like, boy, do we just not have high enough expectations? When I saw that big difference. And I say we because I consider myself part of the statistically significant all city resident group.
I noticed on that front that there was a pretty big difference too in who wants bike infrastructure.
Yeah.
And so I would think that if people who bike think it's pretty bad for kids out there, don't want to have a kid on a bike. And if you drive, it's kind of safer.
Yeah, I think also if you just have like stronger opinions, you're maybe more likely to participate in the community survey. And so if transportation is not kind of your thing that you're into and you are, reached out to participate in the statistically valid survey, you might not have just as strong an opinion on anything. So you might think like, well, it's not perfect, but it's okay,
Yeah, I think the other one that struck me was the difference on going slightly slower in your vehicle. You had two questions about that, but I felt like
it's a little different, but you can maybe guess the reason we asked this question.
Yeah.
Because at the project level, you can sometimes encounter like a statistically invalid group of people who are against doing the thing that might be safer, but they're not really representative of like the broader community. And so this is an important foundation to set that, you know, there's really pretty wide consensus across St. Louis that, you know, hey, we're all willing to do a little bit to get a safer outcome. And I think that's where we want to kind of start the conversation from on, you know, from the capital planning perspective or the project perspective. We should assume people want safety, and then we should work through the details. We shouldn't be afraid to advance those types of designs.
You just,
Great project, great.
you just said something that made me think sensitivity that I have with all of these planning processes is when you are engaging with a group that tends to be more in like a survival or crisis management mindset, and their inability to aspire or dream. Do you all have any tools or facilitation methods in place to get them to that mindset? This is like with the neighborhood planning process. In Ville, Greaterville, Kingsway East, I bring it up a lot because again, understanding where the people are coming from. I don't want a plan to come out that just speaks to addressing their immediate need, because I know they also have a capacity, whether even though it's suppressed, to dream, and those thoughts or desires need to be incorporated as well.
Yeah,
So-
Miriam, can you remind me of the 3 key values in the SLOOP? Because I think there's going to be sort of a parallel here. It was growing, thriving, right. And so to me, like maybe growing is doing a little better and thriving is doing a lot better, right? So it might be like safe is the baseline, you know, more connections is the next thing. And then you have in the plan some more really aspirational sort of like visionary moves. It can't, from my perspective, it can't all be visionary, right? Because it has to address kind of the nuts and bolts of how we do things. I would say that in a lot of, so right now, I think we have many project examples, especially places where Great Rivers Greenway has projects and we're working very closely with them, where they have gotten from that kind of like immediate, how did you express it?
Crisis
Right,
management.
crisis mode to a more aspirational mode, really with time, right, to talk through those things, and with budget to do really like really transformative, high quality projects. And so that's why I think a plan can't be all visionary, because we're not going to have budget to do visionary things on every mile of street in St. Louis. But I think where we can identify that there are big problems today, like big safety problems, those can really become opportunities for that investment that doesn't just address the safety element, but creates something, you know, much higher quality. And I think North Grand from Great Rivers Greenway is the perfect example of that they'll be reconstructing next year. There's a big safety problem there. There's a big accessibility problem, big maintenance problem, but they're not just putting back what's there in a new way. The whole street is completely reimagined.
Yeah. Let me clarify my question. I wasn't questioning what you are putting in the plan. I was questioning or asking about your facilitation method to capture input from a group of people who may not be able to think, or, you know, they may not be inclined to think at that level, given their challenges and circumstances. Like, are you using any unique facilitation methods to make sure you capture their contributions on the aspirational side?
You think is that a question specific to this planning process, or a question more specific to like future projects that might grow out of the planning process?
I think it's specific to every planning process.
It's a good question. Can we put a pin in that one?
Yeah.
Okay.
Jonathan, when you talk to update neighborhood planning, you might weave in some answers to that.
I ask him all the time. I got his answer. Scott? I got his answer.
Speaking of Greenway, speaking of I-64, 30 seconds, describe the $9.5 million Connecting Communities grant.
Yes, okay, so switching gears to a upcoming project. The Biden administration has a relatively new program through the U.S. Department of Transportation called Reconnecting Communities. This is really the first time at the federal level, US DOT has explicitly, I'm gonna go beyond 30 seconds, so I apologize, explicitly recognized the harm that past transportation investments have done in many areas, including, neighborhood demolition, dividing communities, also rail transportation that might just be noisy or hard to cross or, aesthetically bad. So this is the first time there's been money specifically to help cure some of those things or at least bridge across them. And the city of St. Louis with Great Rivers Greenway won a grant for one project as part of the Brickline Greenway to create a bike and pedestrian bridge at Spring Avenue, where there actually used to be a vehicular bridge many years ago. Crossing I-64 and the rail corridor in an area that is, there are limited crossings. So it'll be a key north-south bike route connection, also improves access to the Grand Metrolink station. And so there are other projects we would love to do in the city. There are a number of areas that could use this type of investment, but the city, with GRG, I think is happy to have won this one award, and the project is deep into analysis right now.
Anything else on this topic? Then we are ready to move to our update on other.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. It's a great project. Ready for the update on other major planning initiatives?
If you want to do the switchback, Dylan, to the main deck. Temperature has not changed since we've been in this room, just in case anybody's wondering if you're still hot, that makes sense. Yep, so this is just our monthly glimpse of what's happening, because lots happening and hear about some things in depth each month, but not all things. So want to keep you kind of attuned to what's going on in the world of planning.
Thank you, Miriam. And good evening, Chair. Good evening, Planning Commissioners. I am Jonathan Roper, the City Planning Executive for Neighborhood Planning with the Planning and Urban Design Agency. And this evening we have updates on different neighborhood planning activities, starting with Neighborhood Planning Area 1, which consists of the Ville, Greaterville, Kingsway East neighborhoods. So this particular month and for the past month, we had a few activities. One being the two pictures on the screen on the left. That is the first working group meeting that we had. Where bringing in together community members, residents, also staff of the city of St. Louis, and others who aren't residents but might contribute other ways, working or employment or just services for the area. So these working groups, this was the first one that met to really just meet each other, but also to establish a cadence of meetings. And this would be ongoing, where we want to bring in more city departments with residents to talk through during this. So we have 6 different working groups. One's like housing, for example. So when you talk about housing in any of these communities, you also want to be connected in with different city departments and their projects, but also it's not also the short term and what city departments are doing, but in long term, understanding the gaps in the programs and services and maybe what's needed to move forward. Because as the transportation mobility plan noted earlier, Jackie noted about programming services, capital budgeting and all that stuff too. So that's very important to make these plans come to life. So I don't know, the right here, we actually have, you could actually recognize one of the members standing up there, Mr. Don Rowe there. But this is the Neighborhood Planning Committee first meeting that they met. We're also, just to give a shout out to For the Ville and WashU Studio Lab at Sumner's Economic Empowerment Center. So that's a space that we frequent a lot. And also to note, there is a SOAR analysis, so a strengths, opportunity, aspirations, and responses analysis coming soon, and also a winter workshop February 5th that we're planning in coordination with this other awesome group here, the For the Ville, who has the Martin Luther King Cultural Corridor. So in planning area 1, there's also a number of activities going on, but this is one of the of course, there's the Monarch and John Marshall School and other things that SLDC are doing, but of course the cultural corridor that's being developed as well. So this is just, and you recognize another guy there, one of your planning commissioners, Aaron Williams, who leads the For the Ville, but also this is one of their first meetings with their culture corridor liaisons. And also this Saturday, they'll have a bus tour. So they're partnering with WashU, where they also invited our neighborhood planning committee members that you saw on the other slide before to tour not only the St. Louis City retail quarter locations like the Grove or the Hill, but also in St. Louis County too, to really imagine what is possible, different options, and bring it back to talk more and inform the plan. Planning area 2, which consists of Walnut Park East, Walnut Park West, and Mark Twain. So they started meeting in the past couple months with the neighborhood associations and reaching out to people, and they just had their first informational session, and also the first planning committee meeting this past Monday night. So that was very well attended. And also you could see one of the consultants, Kiara Lewis, just discussing these opportunities with residents and other community members. And they're also working on, as well as the consultant for the first area, the existing conditions analysis as well. Planning area 3, which consists of Baden and North Point, so they're moving forward with, last month they had an information session and a kickoff. So this month, they also had another information session, but also a neighborhood tour. So this started at the Baden Library. And this tour just consisted of traveling throughout the neighborhoods on Broadway, where there's a commercial district, but also a lot of speeding. So you'll hear in their plan more about how to address that too. And they're also working on a big project at, I believe it's 1200 Schweitzer, where they have aspirations for a big skate park, pickleball, basketball. So it's gonna be, planning with them. It's just been a delight. But the tour went to the Halls Ferry Circle, kind of infamous in a lot of people if they know St. Louis. And I'm sorry, it's just the circle, yeah, the circle. But even people in New York are like, whoa, when I travel to St. Louis, whoa, the circle. But so we traveled by bus, and we even had, you can see actually the guy pointing in that picture is John Kohler. So we had different members of city staff as well as residents on the bus tour to just really talk about different conditions. And we ended with another meeting at the Walnut Park Library on the bottom right side. And right now, that QR code in the bottom, if you're interested in being part of their neighborhood planning committee, you can take out your phone and use the QR code to apply to be on their neighborhood planning committee. Another planning area is Project Connect. Actually, I'll go back real quick. So also, which will be coming soon, we have a program, we have the neighborhood planning committee I mentioned. I noted the working groups. But also there are the neighborhood planning ambassadors. So each planning area, something that a lot of planning processes do not do. So St. Louis is doing it. We are actually paying people for their participation as the neighborhood planning ambassador. So the aspiration is to bring in people in community, we do door knocking, help with activities. And so a lot of times the stuff that we talk about, a lot of this planning jargon, sorry, Jackie, sorry, Scott, but a lot of planning jargon that we have here is really translated, that community hears it, absorbs it, and then they can translate it on their own to others too. So hopefully that helps to translate and get that back. So a lot of times, while, it's great to have, a planning commission, strong processes, but a lot of times translating that down to community can be just something that we look forward to, having to do just to make a neighborhood planning process just more effective and efficient. So but neighborhood planning with Project Connect, so that's the other planning area that's out there. That's in coordination with the St. Louis Development Corporation, which consists of St. Louis Place, Jeff Vanderloo, Carr Square, Columbus Square, Old North, St. Louis, and Hyde Park. So they they had a pause, they restarted, but this is one of their, I believe it's their third or fourth neighborhood planning committee meeting since they started to off their pause. So right now we're looking at having the Project Connect team to the planning commission just to give an update because you have not heard from them. So we want, just like the SLOOP or the Transportation Mobility Plan, to give you a nice update. So we'll plan that in coordination with, of course, the SLOOP adoption, and also we'll have we're looking for adoption tentatively in May, but to be determined, things happen. And just other neighborhood planning coordination that we're trying to do too, with the strategic land use plan, transportation mobility plan, sustainability updates with city departments. And in the future, we're looking to talk with the planning commission about proposed future planning areas and also minimum requirements for plan adoption. With that, I'm going to answer any questions or comments from the commission.
Shall we start with the commissioners and alderwomen online? Any questions from you?
No, I don't have any.
No?
Hearing none, I might suggest that as we break, that you find Jonathan and ask a question of him at that
Okay,
time.
all right. Any questions you want to ask right now? Nope, okay, all right. Turn over to you, Don. Oh, wait.
Executive Director's report. I'll do two. One, Jonathan, you heard Aaron ask a question about some particular community engagement type concerns and needs. Have a chat with them about that. One of the consultants that Jonathan has is a firm that is a community engagement consultant, not a team doing planning. And we need a few more nickels, Jonathan, to dig deep into that question. We'll find a few more nickels with that firm. The other part, I'll just say, is 2024 is almost concluding. The work that has been done from the teams, you've presented things here, but the work that we've been doing out in the community, the team's been doing out in the community. The team that's beyond this wall during the daytime isn't a hell of a lot larger than what you see here with the staff that's here. And it's been an incredible amount of work and achievement and consistency and quality during this last year. And it's something I'm very proud of, happy that these folks have been doing it. Like to see their smiles when they end up being successful. And remember, all our stuff, we're out in the community and not just in the back room. So with that, Chair, I think you can adjourn the meeting.
Thanks everyone for the presentations and for your time. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Adjourn.
Oh.
All right.
Second, even though you know whatever.
One of us.
Michelle,